It was a quiet evening in the small suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees and the occasional sound of crickets filled the air. Most people were indoors, settling into their routines, watching TV, reading books, or tucking their kids into bed. But for Marcus Johnson, this was the time he cherished most. It was his chance to unwind after a long day at work. Marcus was a hard-working man in his early 30s. He worked as a mechanic at a local garage, fixing cars and helping people keep their vehicles running smoothly. Despite the dirt and grease that often clung to his hands, Marcus took pride in what he did. He loved solving problems and making things work again. Tonight, however, he wasn't thinking about cars or engines. He was thinking about dinner. Earlier that evening, Marcus's wife, Nicole, had called him while he was still at work. She reminded him to pick up some groceries on his way home. Their fridge was almost empty, and she needed a few essentials to prepare tomorrow's meals. So, after clocking out, Marcus stopped by the nearby grocery store. He grabbed a loaf of bread, some milk, fresh vegetables, and a pack of chicken breasts. With his shopping done, he headed back toward his house, which was only a 10-minute walk away. As Marcus strolled down the sidewalk, the plastic grocery bag swinging gently in his hand, he felt content. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. He had a loving family, a steady job, and a cozy home. His 2 children, 8-year-old Mia and 5-year-old Ethan, were the light of his life. They made every sacrifice worth it. Just thinking about them brought a smile to his face. But as Marcus turned onto Maple Street where he lived, something unusual caught his attention. 2 police cars were parked near the corner, their red and blue lights flashing silently in the darkness. Curious, Marcus slowed down. He wondered if there had been an accident or maybe a break-in somewhere close by. Whatever it was, it didn't seem like the kind of thing that happened often in this peaceful neighborhood. Before Marcus could think much more about it, he noticed 2 figures stepping out of the shadows. They were police officers, Officer Daniels and Officer Carlson. Both men wore dark uniforms and stern expressions. One of them held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dimness. At first, Marcus assumed they were just patrolling the area. But then, to his surprise, they began walking toward him. "Excuse me, sir," one of the officers said, his voice firm. "Can we have a word with you?" Marcus froze for a moment, confused. What could they possibly want? He hadn't done anything wrong. Still, he nodded politely and stopped walking. "Sure," he replied, trying to sound calm. "What's going on?" The officer with the flashlight shone it directly at Marcus's face, forcing him to squint. "We're looking for someone," the officer explained. "A tall black man wearing a hoodie. Seen anyone suspicious around here tonight?" Marcus blinked, momentarily blinded by the light. He glanced down at himself. Yes, he was wearing a hoodie. It was chilly outside, but that didn't mean anything. Lots of people wore hoodies. And besides, he was just coming home from the store. How could they think he was suspicious? "I'm not sure what you mean," Marcus said carefully, keeping his tone respectful. "I live on this street. I was just heading home." The second officer, Carlson, stepped closer. "Where do you live exactly?" he asked, his tone sharper than before. Marcus pointed toward a modest brick house a few doors down. "Right over there," he said. "Number 42. Daniels exchanged a glance with Carlson, then turned back to Marcus. "Mind showing us some ID?" he asked. Marcus hesitated. Something about this situation felt off. Why were they treating him like a suspect? He hadn't done anything wrong. Still, he knew better than to argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Flipping it open, he showed them his driver's license. "This proves I live here," Marcus said, holding it up so they could see. "And I've got my receipt from the store, too." He gestured to the grocery bag in his other hand. "See? I'm just trying to get home." For a brief moment, Marcus hoped this would be enough. Maybe they'd apologize, realize their mistake, and let him go on his way. But instead, Daniels frowned and shook his head. "Sorry, sir," he said. "We're going to need you to come with us." "What?" Marcus exclaimed, his heart skipping a beat. Why? I told you, I'm not who you're looking for. I'm just minding my own business. It's standard procedure, Carlson interjected, already reaching for his handcuffs. You match the description of a suspect. We'll sort it out at the station. Marcus couldn't believe what was happening. This had to be a misunderstanding. Look, he pleaded, raising his hand slightly to show he wasn't a threat. I haven't done anything wrong. Can't you check my address or something? Call. My wife, she's waiting for me at home. But the officers weren't listening. Daniels grabbed Marcus's arm roughly and spun him around, pinning his hands behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked into place, biting into Marcus's wrists. Panic bubbled up inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Arguing wouldn't help. He needed to think clearly. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains or stood on their porches watching the scene unfold. Among them was Lisa Harper, a young woman in her mid-20s who lived a few houses down. She had been sitting on her front steps, scrolling through her phone when she heard the commotion. Now she watched in disbelief as the officers arrested Marcus right in front of her eyes. Something about the situation struck Lisa as deeply unfair. She didn't know Marcus personally, but she recognized him as a regular face in the neighborhood. He seemed like a decent guy, a family man, judging by the photos she'd seen of him with his kids during block parties. There was no way he was involved in whatever crime these officers were investigating. Without thinking twice, Lisa pulled out her phone and started recording. She zoomed in on Marcus, capturing his bewildered expression as he tried to reason with the officers. I haven't done anything, he shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. Why are you doing this? I'm innocent. The officers ignored him, continuing to lead him toward their patrol car. Lisa kept filming, making sure to capture every detail. Her hands trembled slightly, but she stayed focused. She knew how important it was to document moments like this. You never knew when evidence might make a difference. As Marcus was shoved into the back seat of the police car, he caught sight of Lisa standing nearby, her phone aimed in his direction. For a split second, their eyes met. In that moment, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone would see the truth. Maybe someone would speak up for him. The drive to the precinct was silent and tense. Marcus sat slumped in the back seat, staring out the window as the familiar streets of his neighborhood faded into the distance. His mind raced with questions. Would Nicole wonder where he was? Would Mia and Ethan cry when they realized Daddy wasn't coming home? And most importantly, how would he prove his innocence? When they arrived at the station, Marcus was led inside and placed in a holding cell. The space was cold and sterile, with concrete walls and a single bench. As the heavy door slammed shut behind him, Marcus sank onto the bench feeling defeated. He clenched his fists, trying to hold back tears. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to him, not here. But even in his darkest moment, Marcus refused to give up. He remembered something his brother Elijah always told him. Stay strong. Justice will prevail. Those words echoed in his mind, giving him a tiny spark of courage. If anyone could help him now, it was Elijah. Taking a deep breath, Marcus looked up at the ceiling and whispered a silent prayer. Then he waited. For answers. For justice. And for the chance to call the one person who might be able to turn things around. The holding cell was cold and unwelcoming. Marcus sat on the hard bench, his hands still cuffed behind his back. The metal felt icy against his skin, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead did little to ease the tension in the room. He tried to focus on his breathing, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly, but his mind kept racing. Thoughts swirled around like a storm. Thoughts of his family, his job, and the injustice of being locked up for no reason. Marcus replayed the events of the night over and over again in his head. He had been walking home, minding his own business, when those officers stopped him. They hadn't even given him a chance to explain himself properly. All they saw was a black man in a hoodie, and that was enough for them to treat him like a criminal. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But what could he do? He was stuck here, alone, with no way to prove his innocence. As the minutes dragged on, Marcus began to feel a growing sense of helplessness. He thought about Nicole, his wife, and how worried she must be by now. She would have expected him home hours ago. What would she tell the kids if he didn't show up? Would Mia and Ethan cry themselves to sleep wondering where their daddy was? The thought made his chest tighten with guilt and sadness, but then something shifted inside Marcus. He remembered one crucial detail, the single phone call he was allowed to make as a detainee. Most people used it to contact family or friends, but Marcus knew exactly who he needed to call. His brother, Elijah Johnson, wasn't just any ordinary sibling. Elijah was the U.S. Attorney General, one of the most powerful figures in the country's justice system. If anyone could fix this mess, it was him. Summoning every ounce of determination he had left, Marcus stood up and walked to the bars of the cell. "Hey," he called out, trying to get the attention of the officer stationed nearby. "I need to make my phone call." The officer looked up from his desk, glanced at Marcus briefly, and sighed. "All right," he muttered, standing up reluctantly. He unlocked the cell door and motioned for Marcus to follow him. They walked down a narrow hallway to a small booth where a landline phone sat on a table. The officer uncuffed Marcus's hands long enough for him to dial the number, keeping a close eye on him the entire time. Marcus picked up the receiver with trembling fingers. He dialed Elijah's private line from memory, praying his brother would answer. After a few rings, a familiar voice came through the other end. "Hello? Elijah, it's me, Marcus," he said quickly, his voice cracking slightly under the weight of emotion. "Listen, I don't have much time. I've been arrested for no reason, and I'm sitting in a holding cell right now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Elijah spoke again, his tone was calm but sharp. "Slow down, Marcus. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." So Marcus did. He explained how he'd been walking home from the store when two officers stopped him, accused him of fitting the description of a robbery suspect, and refused to listen to his explanations. He told Elijah about the handcuffs, the ride to the station, and the cold, empty cell he was currently trapped in. By the time he finished, his voice was shaking, and tears were streaming down his face. Elijah listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. When Marcus finally fell silent, Elijah exhaled deeply. "Okay, Marcus," he said firmly. "Stay calm. You're going to be fine. I'll handle this." Those words brought a wave of relief crashing over Marcus. Hearing his brother's steady voice reminded him that he wasn't completely alone. Elijah had always been his rock ever since they were kids growing up in a rough neighborhood. No matter how tough things got, Elijah had a way of making everything seem manageable. "I'm going to send someone to the station right away," Elijah continued. "In the meantime, don't say anything to the officers unless you absolutely have to. Do you understand?" "Yes," Marcus replied, nodding even though Elijah couldn't see him. "Thank you, Elijah. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You won't have to find out," Elijah said, his voice softening slightly. "Just hang tight, I'll take care of everything." After hanging up, Marcus returned to his cell feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was relieved to know that Elijah was on his side. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the anger simmering beneath the surface. How could this happen in the first place? Why did people like him have to go through situations like this while others walked free without a second glance? Back in Washington, D.C., Elijah wasted no time. As soon as he hung up the phone, he sprang into action. He called his assistant, Karen Miller, and briefed her on the situation. "Get me all the details you can about this arrest," he instructed, "and notify the local precinct that I'll be reaching out personally. Oh, and Karen, make sure we have eyes on this story. If the media picks it up, we need to be ready." Karen nodded, already typing furiously on her laptop. "Got it, sir. Anything else?" "Yes," Elijah said, his expression grim. "Find out who's in charge at that precinct. We're going to have a serious conversation about accountability." While Elijah worked behind the scenes, Lisa Harper was doing her part too. After filming the arrest, she uploaded the video to social media, adding a caption that explained what she had witnessed. Within minutes, the clip started gaining traction. People from all over the city, and eventually the country, began sharing it, commenting on the blatant injustice of the situation. Lisa watched the reactions roll in, her heart pounding with a mixture. By the time Elijah arrived at the police station, the atmosphere inside was tense. The officers on duty seemed uneasy, glancing nervously at each other as if they could sense a storm brewing. Elijah walked in with purpose, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He wasn't alone. With him were 2 federal agents and a team of lawyers, all dressed professionally and carrying briefcases filled with documents. Their presence alone commanded respect and fear. Elijah approached the front desk where a young officer sat, looking overwhelmed. "I'm here to speak with Captain Reynolds," Elijah said firmly, his voice calm but authoritative. The officer hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond to such a high-profile visitor. Finally, he picked up the phone and made a quick call. A few minutes later, Captain Reynolds appeared, his face pale and his expression guarded. "Attorney General Johnson," Reynolds said, forcing a polite smile. "What brings you here tonight?" Elijah didn't waste time with pleasantries. "My brother, Marcus Johnson, is being held in your custody. I want answers. Now." Reynolds nodded stiffly and gestured for Elijah to follow him into a private office. Once inside, Elijah took a seat, flanked by his team. Reynolds closed the door behind them and leaned against his desk, trying to appear composed. But Elijah could see right through him. The man was nervous, and rightly so. "Let's start with the basics," Elijah began, his tone measured but firm. "Why was my brother arrested? What evidence do you have linking him to this alleged crime?" Reynolds cleared his throat and glanced at a file on his desk. "Your brother matched the description of a suspect involved in a recent robbery. 2 officers identified him as fitting that description and brought him in for questioning." "That's it?" Elijah asked, raising an eyebrow. "A description? You mean to tell me that because Marcus is a tall, black man wearing a hoodie, he's automatically guilty?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "It's standard procedure to bring in individuals who fit the description. We're just doing our jobs." "Doing your jobs?" Elijah repeated, his voice rising slightly. "You locked up an innocent man without any concrete evidence. Did you even bother to check his alibi or verify his identity? Or did you assume guilt based solely on the color of his skin?" The room fell silent. Reynolds opened his mouth to respond but quickly closed it again. He knew Elijah was right. Arresting Marcus had been reckless, and now the consequences were staring him in the face. Meanwhile, Marcus was still sitting in his cell, wondering what was taking so long. He had no idea that his brother had arrived at the station or that Elijah was confronting the captain. All Marcus knew was that every minute felt like an eternity. His thoughts drifted back to Nicole and the kids. What would they think when they found out what happened? Would Mia and Ethan be scared? Angry? Confused? Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Moments later, the cell door swung open and Detective Harris stepped inside. Harris was a seasoned officer, known for his fairness and integrity. Unlike some of his colleagues, he believed in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background. "Marcus Johnson," Harris said, his voice kinder than Marcus expected. "You're free to go." Marcus blinked, stunned. "What? Just like that?" Harris nodded. "Orders from above. Someone's waiting for you outside." Before Marcus could ask more questions, Harris led him out of the cell and into the main area of the station. That's when Marcus saw Elijah standing there, surrounded by a group. When Marcus saw Elijah standing in the middle of the police station, relief washed over him like a tidal wave. For the first time since his arrest, he felt like he could finally breathe. Elijah looked calm and composed, but there was a fire in his eyes that told Marcus his brother wasn't going to let this go easily. "Marcus," Elijah said, stepping forward and placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" Marcus nodded, though his voice trembled when he spoke. "I'm fine. Just shaken up, thanks for coming." Elijah gave him a firm nod. "We'll talk more about this later. Right now, let's get you out of here." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus noticed the stares from the officers around them. Some looked guilty, others annoyed, but none dared to say a word. "The Pedro," Agents and lawyers who had accompanied Elijah followed closely behind, their presence making it clear that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Outside, the air felt cooler and fresher than Marcus remembered. A black SUV was parked near the curb, its engine running. Elijah opened the passenger door for Marcus and gestured for him to get inside. Once they were both seated, the driver pulled away from the station, leaving the tension behind. For a few moments, neither brother spoke. Marcus stared out the window, watching the streets blur past as the weight of everything that had happened began to sink in. Finally, he broke the silence. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Elijah sighed and turned to face him. "Now, we make sure this doesn't happen again, to you or anyone else. I've already got my team working on holding these officers accountable. This kind of behavior can't be tolerated." Marcus nodded slowly, but he still felt uneasy. "Do you think it'll actually change anything? Or will it just blow over like every other case like this?" Elijah hesitated before answering. He knew Marcus had every reason to feel cynical. Stories of racial profiling and police misconduct were all too common, and justice rarely seemed to follow. But Elijah also believed in using his power to fight for change. "It won't fix everything overnight," he admitted, "but we have to start somewhere, and this time, we're not backing down." Back at the precinct, things weren't going smoothly for Captain Reynolds or the two officers involved in Marcus's arrest. News of Elijah's intervention spread quickly among the staff, and everyone knew trouble was brewing. By morning, the story had exploded online thanks to Lisa Harper's video, which continued to gain traction on social media. Lisa woke up early to check her phone and was stunned by the number of notifications she had received. Her video had been shared thousands of times, sparking outrage across the country. People were calling for justice, demanding answers, and criticizing the police department for its handling of the situation. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon it was everywhere, on TV and newspapers and even trending on Twitter. The pressure mounted rapidly. Protesters began gathering outside the precinct, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "End Racial Profiling." Some chanted slogans while others stood silently, their faces filled with determination. Among them was Nicole, Marcus's wife, who had learned about the arrest late last night after receiving a call from Elijah. She brought Mia and Ethan with her, wanting to show support for her husband and stand up for what was right. Inside the station, Captain Reynolds struggled to maintain control. His phone rang nonstop with calls from reporters, community leaders, and government officials, all demanding explanations. Meanwhile, Officers Daniels and Carlson were placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Both men tried to defend their actions, claiming they were following protocol, but their excuses fell flat in the face of public scrutiny. Detective Harris, who had helped release Marcus, found himself caught between loyalty to his colleagues and a growing sense of moral responsibility. He respected Elijah Johnson and admired his commitment to justice. Harris decided to cooperate fully with the investigation, providing honest accounts of what he had witnessed during the arrest. He hoped his testimony might help prevent similar incidents in the future. Later that day, Elijah held a press conference to address the nation. Standing behind a podium adorned with the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice, he spoke with clarity and conviction. Cameras flashed as journalists jotted down notes, eager to capture every word. "This is not just about one man's wrongful arrest," Elijah began, his voice steady and powerful. "This is about a system that allows such injustices to occur, repeatedly. It's about the countless lives affected by racial profiling and unchecked authority. We cannot ignore these issues any longer." He went on to outline steps he planned to take, including launching a nationwide review of police practices and advocating for new legislation aimed at increasing accountability. Elijah emphasized the importance of transparency and urged law enforcement agencies to build trust with the communities they served. Standing beside Elijah during the conference was Marcus. Though initially hesitant to speak publicly, Marcus agreed to share his experience. He stepped up to the microphone, gripping the sides tightly as he looked out at the crowd. His voice wavered at first, but he grew stronger as he spoke. "I never thought something like this would happen to me," Marcus said. I work hard, I take care of my family, and I try to be a good person, but none of that mattered to those officers. All they saw was the color of my skin. That's not fair, and it's not right. His words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. When Marcus finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. For the first time since his arrest, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe sharing his story could make a difference. In the days that followed, the momentum only grew stronger. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss policing reform, inviting experts, activists, and ordinary citizens to participate. Schools held discussions about racial equality, encouraging students to think critically about the world around them. Even some politicians, previously silent on issues of racial injustice, began speaking out in favor of change. Lisa Harper played a key role in keeping the conversation alive. She used her platform to amplify voices often ignored by mainstream media, highlighting stories of individuals who had faced similar injustices. Her documentary project gained widespread attention, drawing interest from major networks and streaming services. Through it all, Marcus remained at the center of the movement. Though he preferred staying out of the spotlight, he understood the importance of using his experience to inspire others. With Elijah's guidance, he started attending rallies and speaking engagements, sharing his story with anyone willing to listen. Despite the challenges ahead, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road to justice wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he wasn't alone. Together with his family, his brother, and countless others fighting for change, he believed a better future was possible. In the weeks following his release, Marcus struggled to adjust to life after the arrest. On the surface, everything seemed normal. He went back to work at the garage, greeted customers with a smile, and fixed cars just like he always had. At home, he played with Mia and Ethan, helped Nicole prepare dinner, and tried to act as if nothing had changed. But deep down, Marcus knew things weren't the same. The memory of that night haunted him. Every time he passed a police car or saw an officer in uniform, his heart raced and his palms grew sweaty. He couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness he'd experienced in that holding cell, the cold metal of the handcuffs, the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights, the way the officers refused to listen to him. It was as though a part of him had been broken, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't piece it back together. Nicole noticed the change in her husband. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, heard him tossing and turning in bed at night, and watched him flinch whenever someone raised their voice. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she sat down beside him on the couch and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Marcus," she said softly, "you don't have to pretend everything's okay. I know it's not." Marcus sighed and leaned back against the cushions, running a hand over his face. I don't know how to explain it," he admitted. "It's like I'm stuck reliving that night over and over again. And every time I think about it, I get so angry. Not just at those officers, but at the whole system. How can this keep happening? How can people treat each other like this?" Nicole nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're not alone in this, Marcus. We're all here for you. Me, the kids, Elijah. You don't have to carry this by yourself." Her words brought tears to Marcus's eyes. He reached out and pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as if afraid to let go. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to cry, releasing some of the pain and frustration he'd been bottling up inside. Elijah, too, was working tirelessly to ensure that Marcus's experience didn't fade into obscurity. He spent long hours in meetings with lawmakers, civil rights activists, and community leaders, drafting new policies aimed at reforming law enforcement practices. One of his top priorities was creating stricter guidelines for identifying suspects, ensuring that officers relied on concrete evidence rather than vague descriptions. He also pushed for mandatory training programs focused on racial sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. But Elijah knew legislation alone wouldn't be enough. Real change required shifting mindsets, challenging deeply ingrained biases, and fostering open dialogue between law enforcement and the communities they served. To that end, he launched a national campaign called Bridging the Divide, which, brought together police officers, activists, and everyday citizens to discuss ways to build trust and mutual respect. The initiative received widespread support, with thousands attending town hall meetings and workshops across the country. Meanwhile, Lisa Harper continued to shine a light on stories like Marcus's through her documentary project. She traveled to different cities, interviewing individuals who had faced racial profiling and police misconduct. Each story added another layer to the narrative, painting a vivid picture of the systemic issues plaguing society. Lisa worked closely with Marcus, weaving his experience into the film's central theme. Though revisiting those painful memories wasn't easy for him, Marcus felt a sense of purpose knowing his story might inspire others to speak out. As production on the documentary progressed, Marcus began attending counseling sessions recommended by Elijah. At first he was hesitant, unsure if talking to a therapist would actually help. But Dr. Angela Carter, a kind and compassionate woman with years of experience helping trauma survivors, quickly put him at ease. During their sessions, Marcus opened up about his feelings of anger, fear, and frustration. Dr. Carter listened patiently, offering guidance and tools to help him process his emotions. "You've been through something incredibly difficult," she told him during one session. "It's okay to feel upset, to question why this happened to you. But remember, your strength lies in how you choose to respond. You have the power to turn this pain into something meaningful." Her words resonated deeply with Marcus. Slowly, but surely he began to heal. He started journaling, writing down his thoughts and reflections as a way to organize his mind. He also reconnected with old friends, leaning on their support during tough times. Most importantly, he reminded himself of the love and joy in his life, his family, his faith, and the hope for a better future. Back in Willow Creek, the neighborhood buzzed with renewed energy. Inspired by Marcus's courage and Elijah's leadership, residents came together to organize events promoting unity and understanding. They hosted block parties where neighbors shared food and laughter, held book clubs focused on social justice literature, and even started a community garden to foster collaboration and connection. Lisa became a regular presence in the neighborhood, often stopping by to check in with Marcus and Nicole. She admired their resilience and wanted to ensure they felt supported throughout the process. One afternoon, while filming additional footage for her documentary, she asked Marcus what message he hoped viewers would take away from his story. "I want people to know that change is possible," Marcus said thoughtfully, "but it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without effort. We all have a role to play, whether it's speaking up when we see injustice, supporting those who are struggling, or simply educating ourselves about the issues. If my story can inspire even one person to take action, then going through all of this will have been worth it." Lisa smiled, touched by his sincerity. "You're already making a difference, Marcus. People are listening, they're watching, and they're ready to follow your lead." As the months passed, progress began to show. Officers Daniels and Carlson faced disciplinary hearings, during which Detective Harris testified about the lack of evidence supporting their actions. Both men were eventually fired from the force and charged with misconduct. While the outcome didn't erase the harm they had caused, it sent a clear message: accountability mattered. Captain Reynolds, meanwhile, implemented several reforms within the precinct, including body cameras for all officers and monthly bias training sessions. Though skeptical at first, many officers embraced the changes, recognizing the importance of rebuilding trust with the community. For Marcus, the journey toward healing and justice was far from over. But with each step forward, he felt more hopeful than before. He realized that while he couldn't control everything that happened to him, he could choose how to respond. And by sharing his story, standing up for what was right, and fighting for a better tomorrow, he was doing exactly that. One evening, as Marcus stood on his front porch watching the sunset, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but he knew he wasn't walking it alone. Together with his family, his brother, and countless others committed to change, he believed a brighter future was within reach. Months had passed since Marcus's arrest, and life in Willow Creek had begun to settle into a new rhythm. The neighborhood felt different now, more connected, more aware. People who once kept to themselves were now greeting each other on the streets, sharing stories and ideas about how to make their community stronger. For Marcus, this sense of unity was a source of comfort. It reminded him that even in the darkest moments, people could come together to create light. The documentary Lisa Harper had been working on premiered on a popular streaming platform, drawing millions of viewers within its first week. Titled Unseen Truths, the film explored the realities of racial profiling and police misconduct through personal stories like Marcus's. It didn't shy away from tough topics, showing raw footage of protests, interviews with victims' families, and heartfelt conversations with officers willing to acknowledge systemic flaws. But it also highlighted hope, stories of resilience, courage, and progress. Marcus attended the premiere with Nicole, Mia, Ethan, and Elijah. They sat in a packed theater surrounded by friends, neighbors, and strangers who had been touched by the movement. When Marcus's segment came on screen, the room fell silent. Viewers watched as he recounted his experience, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. As the credits rolled, the audience erupted into applause, standing to honor the courage of everyone involved. Afterward, during a Q&A session, Lisa invited Marcus to join her on stage. The spotlight made him nervous, but he stepped forward anyway, gripping the microphone tightly. "I didn't do anything special," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "All I did was tell the truth about what happened to me. But if sharing my story helped someone else find their voice, then it was worth it." The crowd cheered, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that his story wasn't just about him anymore. It belonged to everyone fighting for justice. That night, as they left the theater, Marcus hugged Lisa tightly. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." In the weeks following the premiere, Unseen Truths sparked widespread discussion. Schools incorporated it into their curriculums, churches hosted screenings followed by panel discussions, and advocacy groups used it as a tool to push for policy changes. Marcus received countless messages from people across the country thanking him for speaking out. Some shared their own experiences, while others simply expressed gratitude for shedding light on an issue often ignored. Inspired by the response, Marcus decided to take his involvement a step further. With Elijah's encouragement, he founded a nonprofit organization called Pathways to Justice. Its mission was twofold: to educate youth about their rights and to advocate for meaningful police reform. Marcus partnered with local schools, hosting workshops where students learned how to interact safely with law enforcement and understood their legal protections. He also worked with community leaders to develop programs aimed at fostering trust between residents and police officers. One of the organization's biggest successes came when Marcus organized a mentorship program pairing teenagers with positive role models. Teachers, coaches, business owners, and even retired officers committed to change. These mentors helped guide young people through challenges, teaching them skills like conflict resolution and leadership. For many kids, having someone believe in them made all the difference. Elijah continued his work in Washington, D.C., using his position as U.S. Attorney General to champion policies promoting equality and accountability. One of his proudest achievements was passing the Justice Accountability Act, which required independent oversight boards to review cases of alleged misconduct and mandated transparency in disciplinary actions. The bill faced fierce opposition, but Elijah's determination and public support, fueled by stories like Marcus's, ensured its passage. On the day the act was signed into law, Elijah invited Marcus to stand beside him at the ceremony. As President Carter handed Elijah the pen used to sign the document, cameras flashed, capturing the moment for history. Later, Elijah turned to Marcus and smiled. "This is your victory too," he said. "Without your bravery, none of this would have been possible." Marcus nodded, overwhelmed with pride. He never imagined that one night of injustice could lead to such profound change, but he knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. There was still so much work to be done. Back in Willow Creek, Marcus and Nicole celebrated small victories every day. Their children, Mia and Ethan, were thriving in school, inspired by their father's activism. Mia wrote an essay about fairness for her social studies class, earning praise from her teacher. Ethan drew pictures of superheroes saving the world, telling anyone who'd listen, "My dad's a hero too." Even Lisa remained a constant presence in their lives, checking in regularly and collaborating with Marcus on future projects. Together, they planned a series of short films highlighting underreported issues affecting marginalized communities. Each project brought them closer to their shared goal of creating awareness and driving action. As autumn arrived, painting the trees in vibrant shades of orange and red, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he'd come. Standing in his backyard watching Mia and Ethan chase leaves blown by the crisp wind, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, there were still challenges ahead, but he had faith in the power of persistence and unity. That evening, Marcus attended a community event honoring civil rights activists. Dozens of people gathered in the park, sharing food, music, and laughter. Elijah delivered a speech praising those who had fought tirelessly for justice, reminding everyone that true progress required collective effort. When he finished, the crowd applauded, turning their attention to Marcus as he stepped up to speak. "Tonight, we celebrate not just what we've achieved, but what we're capable of achieving together," Marcus said, his voice strong and clear. "We've shown that when we stand united, we can overcome anything. Let's keep pushing forward for ourselves, for our children, and for generations to come." As fireworks lit up the sky, Marcus looked around at the faces of his family, friends, and neighbors. In their smiles, he saw hope. A reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, the destination was worth it. And with that thought, Marcus felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing he wouldn't have to walk the path alone.